So I'm just putting a little bit of compost here around this newly planted mini tree, and I can't wait to tell you about it. So this little tree is Ginkgo biloba american, and it is a low-growing form that gets just a couple of feet tall by maybe 6 feet wide over time. And today I'm going to tell you why ginkgos are so cool and why you probably want to have one in your garden. Hi everyone, I'm Erin, the Impatient Gardener. I live and garden here in southeastern Wisconsin, which is now classified as Zone 6A. And this plant caused me to change this garden. So this little part of the garden is one of the parts of the garden that we actually interact with every single day of the year multiple times, because this is a little oval that crosses across this path that we walk through on the way to and from the garage as many times a day as we need to do that, which usually is many. So I planted this garden in 2011. This side of the little oval consisted of Picea engelmanni blue magoo, which I bought at about 2 feet tall from what was then Clem's Song Sparrow Nursery, which unfortunately has gone out of business. And it's growing really great. It's probably 13 or 14 feet tall now, but unfortunately it keeps dying. The branches keep dying from the bottom up. I don't really know what that's about, but it's actually a little bit of a blessing, because if this were full width at the bottom, this would probably take up this whole garden. There wouldn't be room for anything else. So that allows us to do some interesting planting underneath it and around it. One of the things that grows on it is a clematis called Alba luxurians, which I train right up it, which means I have a spruce that has white flowers on it. And the other thing that was planted in this bed that has never changed since day one was an earth angel hosta. I think that might have been the hosta the year that I planted that, or close to it. And it's a beautiful big hosta, yellow and blue basically. And even though this garden is not quite full sun, but darn close to full sun, probably technically meets the requirement for full sun, although it is shielded from hot late day sun. It grew really well there for most of the year. So it looked fabulous until probably mid to late August, and then it would start getting a little crispy. And up here in these cooler zones, we can often get away with pushing hostas into a fair amount of sun so long as they have enough water. And my garden is one of those places where I do that with some regularity. But along comes American, which is a little bit of a dream plant for me. I have always liked this ginkgo, and I like ginkgos in general. And well, Earth Angel had to get the boot. So Earth Angel got pulled out, divided. The whole center of it, by the way, was fully dead. So I think I got 4 chunks out of it, even though the center was dead. That got transplanted to a couple different locations, including a little corner of this bed, by the way. But we had to make room for this fabulous ginkgo. So Little American isn't looking that exciting yet, because of course it's just starting to leaf out. And unfortunately, I think a few of the leaves got nipped by some frost, because it came from Oregon at Isley Nursery and came to cold Wisconsin, and it's a little bit behind. I have no doubt it will recover just fine, because ginkgos are tough. So ginkgos were around in the Jurassic period. And we know this because there are fossils that are over 100 million years old that have been found. The other interesting thing about Ginkgo biloba is that it is one of a kind. It is the only species of ginkgo that exists. Other species are gone. So there's only Ginkgo biloba. There's no ginkgo anything else. So with this spruce here, which is Picea engelmanni, there's Picea glauca and Picea abies and Picea orientalis and all sorts of species in that Picea genus. Ginkgo, just biloba. That's all you get. But there are a whole bunch of varieties within that. So that's how you get a plant where you could have Little American like this, or you can have an enormous, many 100-foot tall ginkgo. So the only way that a plant can live this long is if it adapts really well, which is why it makes such a good tree in our home gardens, because after it gets established, it is quite adaptable to a wide range. It is actually hardy from zone 3 to zone 9, so a huge range of hardiness zones. It likes good drainage and moist soil, and it likes part sun to sun, but it can also handle things outside of that range, because it's just meant to adapt. That is how this plant, whose ancestors hung out with the dinosaurs, is hanging out in my yard now, by being adaptable. It also very well could have been lost at some point, and the thing that saved it ironically, is actually the thing that some people don't like about it, and that is its nuts. Its nuts, which are sort of pistachio shaped, are routinely eaten in Asia, and hundreds of years ago, it was actually the nuts that made people want to have this tree around. So like any other nut tree in Asia, this tree was grown and planted so that people could eat its nuts. And were it not for those nuts, there probably wouldn't have been a lot of reason for people to be interested in doing anything to cultivate this tree, and it very well could have just disappeared. So ginkgos are interesting in another way too, which is that they are dioecious, which means they are either male or female. Many trees can be both. That is not how it works with ginkgos, sort of, with a little bit of an asterisk. So if you know nothing else about ginkgos, I would guess you know two things. One, you probably recognize those very easily identifiable fan-shaped leaves that I think are absolutely gorgeous. But you also probably know and have either experienced or heard that when the fruit falls from the tree, it does not smell good. In fact, it smells apparently downright foul. So some people get worried about planting a ginkgo because they don't want that stinky fruit in their yard. So new ginkgos come about in two ways. One, they can grow from seed, which apparently is not that difficult to do. Or two, they can be grafted. Now, trees are often grafted. Many of the trees in our yards are grafted, but usually that's for different reasons, and it's often to put them on a rootstock that either, like in the case of apples and crab apples, the rootstock determines how big they get. Sometimes things are grown on rootstock because the rootstock is more vigorous, but it allows you to put on a more interesting top bit. But in the case of ginkgos, they are grafted to ensure the sex of the tree. Since most people are not interested in a female ginkgo, what they do is they will take a branch from a male ginkgo and they will graft that on to rootstock. That way you get a male ginkgo. Probably. We're going to get to that in a second. So because ginkgos are incredibly long-lived, and we are talking hundreds and hundreds of years, there are 1,000-year-old ginkgos in Asia. There is one at Kew Gardens in England that is over 250 years old. Unless something terrible happens to it, these trees, I guarantee you, will outlive you. And because of that, ginkgos mature quite late in life. Like, they don't really reach maturity until maybe 25 or 30 years old. So you might buy a ginkgo as a male and grow it on and everything's great, and then one day your male ginkgo has fruit on it. And you go, well, that seems weird because male plants aren't supposed to carry fruit. Now that could be for a couple of reasons. One, it could have been seed grown, so you just don't know until they get old enough. I do believe they've actually figured out the genes on this, so there might be some science to tell earlier on whether ginkgo is male or female, but I don't think that's in broad use at this point. The thing is that, you never know. Maybe the branch that was grafted really wasn't a male. Maybe somebody made a mistake. Who knows? You don't know until they get a little older. But sometimes ginkgos do funny things, and sometimes a male ginkgo starts becoming a female ginkgo, and this is rare, but it's what happened with the ginkgo tree at Kew. I think it was in 2006, 2013, somewhere in there. That tree that was male and has been there, like I said, it's more than 250 years old. That tree started producing fruit on one branch. One branch suddenly became female. And to my knowledge, nobody fully understands why it did that or what that's about, but it can happen. And it's not common for that to happen, but it does happen. So sometimes ginkgo maybe plays a little trick on you. And honestly, given the history of ginkgo, my guess is trust the tree because it probably knows better than we do. So if you buy a ginkgo from a reputable nursery, more than likely it's probably a grafted plant that has probably been grafted with a male branch on it, and it's probably going to stay male. But you never know. It might not. And I'm just going to say this. If for some reason you end up with a ginkgo that is female, for whatever reason, don't get rid of it because we need female ginkgos. We need to keep reproducing ginkgos by seed. You don't get seed if all the ginkgos are only male. In fact, Frank Lloyd Wright had a female ginkgo outside his house in Illinois, and it was huge, and he complained about the smell of it all the time. But you know what Frank Lloyd Wright didn't do? He didn't cut the thing down. So the other thing about the fruit, and by the way, I have never personally experienced it, so I can't speak to how bad it really does smell, It only starts to smell after it falls off the tree and starts rotting on the ground. So if you come across a female ginkgo, one thing you could do is just pick the fruit up and get rid of it before it starts rotting in the middle of the street. And then you don't have to smell whatever that terrible smell supposedly is. Now, I have 2 other ginkgos in my yard. This is my 3rd one. I certainly hope I don't stop at 3 because I can see this becoming very collection-y. I have one called Gnome. I ordered that from Broken Arrow Nursery. I believe it was 2016 that I planted that. And if I recall, it was about this big. It came in a 4-inch pot. It was about this big. And I said, well, that's never going to make it. And boy, did it make it. It's phenomenal. In fact, these days I prune it to actually keep it to a smaller size because of where I plant it, which is right along the side of the patio. And the other one I have is one called Goldspire, and it's a little bit misshapen because it had a terrible accident in its youth in which a tree was dropped right on top of it and completely broke it off. So we lost the leader, and I sort of created a new leader out of it, and it's a little misshapen, but you know what? I still love it. It's still a beautiful tree, so it gets to stay. The good news is that ginkgos take really well to pruning. In fact, some people grow these as espaliers, which is stunning, and boy, do I wish I had a spot I could do that in. I've been pruning my gnome now for a few years just to keep it a little bit more compact, but also I've kind of been doing sort of a little bit of a Nawaki thing with it, which is that Japanese form of pruning that actually means garden tree, but it's sort of like, imagine a tree in a garden that you're kind of turning into a bonsai, a little bit of that, where I'm kind of creating pads on it. It takes really well to pruning, so you can prune them if you need to. So I'm positive that you are sufficiently convinced that you need to be growing a ginkgo. And honestly, there isn't a lot to know about growing them. Like I said, they prefer part to full sun. You can push them into part shade. Like I said, moist, well-draining soil. They do prefer the soil in the beginning to be a bit on the alkaline side. And that's actually why I think my gnome has grown as well as it has, because we have alkaline soil here. So if you are in an area with more acidic soil, the guys at Mr. Maple highly recommend using a few tablespoons of garden lime on it to get it started. And they said in their experience that really helps kickstart them. They do recover a little bit slow from transplanting, so, you know, it's a bit of a investment in terms of taking care of them for maybe longer than you might have to with something else. So a little bit of babying for a few years. They also don't recommend that you use a lot of like bark mulch on top of these. You want a lot of airflow there. So I've done a little bit of compost here. I'll probably do some pine needles, and that's going to be the mulch for this tree. Also, they don't seem to be tasty to deer, which is always a benefit, and the forms just run the gamut. From big to little, there's beautiful variegated leaves, different leaf forms. There's really some interesting ones out there. You can see why people go a little nutty about them, honestly. But the very best thing about them is just how adaptable they are. Because even though I've told you all these things that they like, they adapt well to other conditions, which is why they also make really good street trees, really good urban trees, really good downtown trees. They can just deal with a lot of stuff. The other thing with ginkgos is that they get beautiful almost across the board. Some are better than others, I'm sure, but almost across the board, they get beautiful bright yellow foliage in fall. And then they do this very cool thing, which is an almost synchronized leaf drop, in which you get a day in which, like, all of a sudden, like 80% or more of the leaves just drop one day, which actually is, well, A, it's interesting because very few other trees do that. B, it's quite beautiful because one day you just have this sort of golden ring on the ground. But C, it's really helpful for cleaning up because you only clean it up once. So really, you don't have an excuse not to plant a ginkgo. For almost everyone watching this video, it's going to be hardy for you, and it's going to be able to likely adapt to the conditions that you can offer it. And by the way, they also grow very well in containers, so you can do that too. And in fact, 2 years ago when I was at Chanticleer Garden in Pennsylvania, there was a gorgeous variegated one in a container. And if you think I don't have that on my mind right now, you don't know me well enough to know that I definitely want to do that. So really the only thing you have to ask yourself now is, what ginkgo are you going to plant? So I hope you found that information about this very cool plant to be interesting, and I hope you find a spot for one in your garden. I mean, I'm not a member of the ginkgo lobby or anything, but I would be if there was one. All right, have a great day in your garden. We'll see you soon.